If you are listening right now, this episode is for you.
Yes, especially if English feels difficult sometimes.
Don't worry, we've all been there.
Hello everyone, I'm James.
And I'm Amelia. Welcome to Learning English Studio.
Before we begin, please subscribe to our channel and like this podcast.
It really supports us and helps this show grow.
All right, Amelia, what's today's topic?
Let's get started. Today, we're going to talk about something that every English learner needs to know: how to discuss your future plans in English. You know, when someone asks, "What are you planning to do after graduation?" or "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" and your mind just goes blank, that's what we're tackling today.
That's such a great topic. I remember when I was learning English, talking about future plans was always tricky. There's so many tenses to choose from. Will, going to, present continuous. It can be really confusing for students.
Exactly. And it's not just about grammar. It's about expressing your hopes, dreams, and ambitions in a way that sounds natural in English. Whether you're planning to study abroad, apply for a job, or just thinking about personal goals, being able to talk about your future confidently is such an important skill.
Definitely. I think what makes it challenging is that different situations call for different ways of talking about the future. Like if you've already made a decision, you might use, "I'm going to." But if you're just thinking about possibilities, you might say, "I'm thinking of," or "I might."
That's so true. And there's also the cultural aspect to consider. In some cultures, people are very direct about their ambitions, while in others, it's more common to speak about future plans in a more modest way. This can really affect how learners express themselves in English.
That's an interesting point. I've noticed that too. Some students might feel uncomfortable saying, "I'm going to be the best engineer in the world," because in their culture, that might sound arrogant. But in English, especially in professional contexts, being confident about your goals is often seen as a positive trait.
Exactly. And that's something we'll explore today: how to strike that balance between confidence and modesty when discussing your future plans in English. We'll look at different scenarios, from casual conversations with friends to more formal job interviews.
And I think it's also worth mentioning that future plans can change, right? So we should talk about how to express uncertainty or flexibility in your plans too, like using phrases such as, "I'm considering," or "I haven't decided yet, but I'm leaning toward."
Oh, absolutely. Life is unpredictable, and it's completely normal for plans to evolve. Being able to communicate that uncertainty in English is just as important as expressing firm plans. It shows adaptability and self-awareness, which are valuable qualities in any language.
So where should we start? Maybe with the basics, the different tenses and structures we use to talk about the future in English.
That sounds perfect. Let's start with the fundamentals and then build up to more complex expressions and contexts. By the end of this episode, our listeners should feel much more confident when someone asks them about their future plans in English.
Great. I'm excited to dive into this topic. It's something that will really help our listeners in their English journey, whether they're students preparing for exams, professionals planning career moves, or just anyone thinking about what comes next in life.
All right then, let's get started with talking about your future plans in English, right here on Learning English Studio.
So Amelia, let's start with the basics. When talking about future plans in English, what are the main tenses or structures that students should know?
Great question, James. There are several ways to talk about the future in English, but for discussing plans specifically, I'd say the most important ones are going to and the present continuous. These are typically used for plans that have already been decided.
Right. So for example, if someone asks, "What are you doing this weekend?" and I've already made plans, I could say, "I'm going to visit my grandparents," or "I'm visiting my grandparents." Both would be correct.
Exactly. Both are grammatically correct and commonly used. Generally, going to is more common in everyday speech, while the present continuous often sounds a bit more definite, as if arrangements have already been made. But in many cases, they're interchangeable.
That's helpful to know. And what about using will? I know students often get confused about when to use will versus going to.
The classic will versus going to dilemma. This is something that trips up so many English learners. Generally speaking, will is used for spontaneous decisions made at the moment of speaking, predictions based on opinion, or promises. Going to is used for plans and intentions that already exist before the moment of speaking.
So if someone says, "I forgot my umbrella, I think it's going to rain," that makes sense because they're making a prediction based on what they see. But if they say, "I'll bring an umbrella tomorrow," that's a spontaneous decision made right then.
Perfect examples. You've got it exactly right. And this distinction is really important when talking about future plans. If you're discussing something you've already decided to do, going to is usually the better choice.
That makes sense. I think another challenge for students is knowing when to use more complex structures, like the future perfect or future continuous. Are those important for talking about future plans?
That's a good point. The future perfect, will have done, and future continuous, will be doing, are definitely more advanced structures, but they can be really useful for talking about future plans in specific contexts. For example, if you're discussing a project timeline, you might say, "By next month, we will have completed the first phase."
Oh, I see. So these structures are more specialized and might be particularly useful in professional or academic contexts rather than casual conversations.
Exactly. For everyday conversations about future plans, sticking with going to, present continuous, and basic will usually serve you well. But as students become more advanced, these other structures can add precision to how they discuss their future plans.
That's a good approach. Start with the basics and then gradually incorporate more complex structures as needed. I think that's a practical strategy for our listeners.
Definitely. And remember, the goal isn't to use every possible future tense correctly, but to communicate your plans clearly and naturally. Sometimes simpler is better, especially when you're still building confidence.
That's so true. I think students often put too much pressure on themselves to use perfect grammar, when really what matters most is being understood.
Exactly. And that's something we should emphasize throughout this episode: communication over perfection. Now, shall we move on to some specific scenarios where students might need to talk about their future plans in English?
Yes, let's do that. I think discussing different contexts will really help our listeners understand how to apply these grammar rules in real-life situations.
Great. Let's start with one of the most common scenarios, talking about educational plans. This is something students often need to discuss, whether in casual conversations or more formal settings like interviews or applications.
Oh, definitely. I remember when I was applying to universities, I had to write essays and do interviews about my educational plans. It was quite challenging to express myself clearly in English.
I can imagine. So, for educational plans, what are some key phrases and structures that would be helpful?
Well, for short-term educational plans, like what you're studying now or planning to take next semester, you could use phrases like, "I'm currently studying," or "next semester I'm planning to take," or "I'm going to focus on."
Those are great examples. And for longer-term educational goals, like graduate school or specialized training, you might say, "I'm hoping to pursue a master's degree in," or "My goal is to specialize in," or "I'm considering applying to programs in."
Right. And it's also important to be able to explain why you have these educational plans. Phrases like, "I chose this field because," or "I'm interested in this area because," or "This program will help me achieve my goal of," can add depth to your response.
That's such an important point, James. Being able to explain the reasoning behind your plans shows thoughtfulness and motivation. It's not just about what you plan to do, but why you plan to do it.
Exactly. And I think this is where many students struggle, not with stating their plans, but with explaining their motivations in clear, natural-sounding English.
Definitely. And that's something we can help with today. Let's create a sample dialogue about educational plans to show how these phrases and structures can come together naturally.
Great idea. How about we pretend I'm a student who's just completed my undergraduate degree, and you're asking about my future educational plans?
Perfect. Let's do that. So, James, I hear you've just graduated with your bachelor's degree. Congratulations. What are your educational plans for the future?
Thanks, Amelia. Well, I'm planning to take a gap year to gain some work experience first. After that, I'm going to apply for master's programs in environmental science. I'm particularly interested in universities that offer research opportunities in sustainable agriculture.
That sounds fascinating. Why did you choose environmental science as your field of study?
I've always been passionate about environmental issues, and during my undergraduate studies, I volunteered with several conservation organizations. That experience really solidified my interest in pursuing a career in this field. I believe that with a master's degree, I'll be better equipped to make a meaningful contribution to sustainable development initiatives.
Wow, that's really impressive. It sounds like you've given this a lot of thought. Do you have any specific universities in mind for your master's program?
I'm looking at several options, but I'm particularly interested in programs in Scandinavia, as they're known for their innovative approaches to environmental education. I'm hoping to specialize in sustainable food systems, as I believe that's where I can make the most impact.
That's wonderful, James. It sounds like you have a clear vision for your future. I wish you the best of luck with your applications.
Thank you, Amelia. I appreciate that.
That was a great example, James. It shows how to discuss educational plans naturally, using a variety of phrases and structures. You explained your short-term plans, taking a gap year, your longer-term goals, masters in environmental science, and your motivations clearly.
Thanks. I tried to incorporate some of the phrases we discussed, like I'm planning to, I'm going to apply for, and I'm particularly interested in. I also made sure to explain why I chose this field and what I hope to achieve.
You did a fantastic job, and I think our listeners can see how these elements come together to create a natural, informative response about educational plans. The key is to be specific about your plans while also explaining your motivations.
Definitely. And I think another important aspect is showing enthusiasm and genuine interest in your plans. When you talk about something you're truly passionate about, it comes through in your language and makes your response more engaging.
That's so true, James. Authenticity is key. When you genuinely care about your plans, it's easier to talk about them naturally and persuasively. Now, shall we move on to another scenario? How about discussing career plans?
Yes, let's do that. Career plans are something that comes up in so many contexts, from job interviews to casual conversations with friends and family.
Definitely. And this is an area where many English learners feel particularly pressured to sound professional and confident. So let's explore some useful phrases and strategies for discussing career plans in English.
Great. For immediate career plans, like jobs you're applying for or short-term goals, you might use phrases like, I'm currently looking for positions in, or my immediate goal is to gain experience in, or I'm hoping to secure a role as.
Those are excellent examples. And for longer-term career aspirations, you could say, in 5 years, I see myself, or my long-term goal is to, or eventually, I'd like to transition into. These phrases show ambition and forward thinking.
Right. And it's also important to be able to discuss the skills and qualifications you're developing to achieve your career goals. Phrases like, I'm working on improving my, or I'm planning to get certified in, or I'm developing my skills in, can demonstrate your commitment to professional growth.
That's such a valuable point, James. Showing that you're actively working toward your career goals makes your plans more credible and impressive. It's not just about what you want to do, but what steps you're taking to get there.
Exactly. And I think this is particularly important in job interviews, where employers want to see not just ambition, but also a practical plan for achieving your goals.
Definitely. And let's not forget about the importance of flexibility in career plans. Sometimes it's good to acknowledge that plans might change. Phrases like, while my primary goal is, but I'm also open to, or I'm exploring several paths, but I'm leaning toward, can show adaptability.
That's a great point. Being too rigid about your career plans might actually work against you, especially in today's rapidly changing job market. Showing that you're adaptable and open to opportunities can be really valuable.
Absolutely. Now, would you like to do another sample dialogue, this time focusing on career plans?
Sure. I can play the role of someone who's been working for a few years and is thinking about their next career move.
Perfect. Let's do that. So, James, you've been working in marketing for about 3 years now, right? What are your career plans for the future?
Yes, that's right. Well, at the moment, I'm really enjoying my current role, but I'm starting to think about my next steps. In the short term, I'm planning to take on more project management responsibilities to broaden my experience.
That sounds like a smart move. How does that fit into your longer-term career goals?
Eventually, I'd like to move into a leadership position, perhaps as a marketing director. To achieve that, I'm working on developing my strategic planning skills, and I'm hoping to complete a certification in digital marketing strategy next year.
That's really impressive, James. It sounds like you have a clear path mapped out. Have you considered any specific industries or types of companies you'd like to work for in the future?
I'm particularly interested in the tech industry, as I believe it offers exciting opportunities for growth and innovation. That said, I'm keeping my options open and would be happy to explore opportunities in other sectors as well. What's most important to me is finding a role where I can continue to learn and make a meaningful impact.
That's a great perspective, James. It sounds like you have both clear goals and the flexibility to adapt to new opportunities. I wish you the best of luck with your career aspirations.
Thank you, Amelia. I appreciate that.
That was another excellent example, James. You demonstrated how to discuss both short-term and long-term career plans, how to show that you're actively working toward your goals, and how to express flexibility in your plans.
Definitely. And I think another important aspect is connecting your career plans to your values and interests. When you can explain why a particular career path appeals to you, it makes your plans more compelling and authentic.
That's so true, James. Being able to articulate the why behind your career plans shows self-awareness and purpose. Now, shall we move on to another scenario? How about discussing personal goals and dreams?
Yes, that's a great idea. Personal goals and dreams often come up in more casual conversations, and they can be a really fun way to practice talking about the future in English.
Definitely. And this is where you can really let your personality shine through in English conversations. Whether you're talking about travel goals, hobbies you want to pursue, or personal development objectives, discussing personal dreams can be both enjoyable and great language practice.
Absolutely, and I think this is an area where students can feel more relaxed, as it's not less formal than discussing educational or career plans. It's a chance to be more creative and expressive in English.
Exactly. So for personal goals and dreams, what are some useful phrases and structures?
Well, for travel plans, you might use phrases like, "I'm hoping to visit," or "My dream is to travel to," or "I'm planning a trip to." These are great for talking about places you want to see and experiences you want to have.
Those are perfect examples. And for personal development goals, like learning a new skill or improving yourself in some way, you could say, "I'd like to get better at," or "I'm working on learning," or "One of my goals is to master."
Right. And for more ambitious dreams or long-term aspirations, you might use phrases like, "Someday I hope to," or "It's always been my dream to," or "If I had the chance, I would." These expressions show that these are perhaps less concrete plans, but still important aspirations.
Those are great suggestions. And I think what's particularly nice about discussing personal goals is that you can be more imaginative and creative. There's less pressure to have a realistic, well-thought-out plan, which can make the conversation more relaxed and enjoyable.
Definitely. And this is also a great opportunity to use more descriptive language to paint a picture of your dreams and aspirations. You can talk about how you imagine these experiences will feel, what they'll mean to you, and why they're important to you.
That's such a valuable point, James. Using descriptive language not only makes your conversation more engaging, but also helps you practice a wider range of vocabulary and expressions. Now, shall we do another sample dialogue, this time focusing on personal goals and dreams?
Sure, I can play the role of someone sharing their personal aspirations and dreams.
Perfect. Let's do that. So, James, when you're not busy with work, what are some of your personal goals and dreams for the future?
Oh, I love talking about this. Well, one of my biggest dreams is to travel through Southeast Asia. I'm hoping to take a sabbatical from work in a couple of years and spend at least 3 months exploring countries like Thailand, Vietnam, and Indonesia.
That sounds amazing. What attracts you to Southeast Asia specifically?
I'm fascinated by the rich cultures, delicious food, and stunning landscapes. I've been watching travel documentaries and reading blogs about the region, and it just looks incredible. I'm particularly excited about the idea of trekking in the mountains of northern Vietnam and exploring the temples of Angkor Wat in Cambodia.
Wow, that sounds like an incredible adventure. Are there any other personal goals you're working toward?
Yes, I'm also trying to learn Spanish. It's always been my dream to be bilingual, and I'm planning to take an intensive course next year. Eventually, I'd love to be able to travel through South America and communicate confidently with locals in their native language.
That's wonderful, James. It sounds like you have some really exciting personal goals. What's motivating you to learn Spanish specifically?
Well, I've always been interested in Latin American culture, the music, the literature, the food, and I think being able to speak Spanish would open up so many opportunities for connection and understanding when I travel. Plus, it's a beautiful language, and I enjoy the challenge of learning something new.
That's fantastic, James. It sounds like you have some wonderful dreams and goals to work toward. I hope you achieve them all.
Thank you, Amelia. I'm doing my best to make them happen, one step at a time.
That was another great example, James. You demonstrated how to discuss personal goals and dreams in a natural, engaging way. You used phrases like, "One of my biggest dreams is," "I'm hoping to," and "It's always been my dream to express your aspirations.
Thanks. I tried to be specific about my goals, while also explaining my motivations and what excites me about them. I think sharing the why behind your dreams makes the conversation more meaningful and personal.
Definitely. And I loved how you described what attracts you to these goals, the cultures, the experiences, the opportunities for connection. That descriptive language really brought your dreams to life and made the conversation more engaging.
Thanks. I think that's one of the joys of discussing personal goals. You can really let your enthusiasm show and share what you're passionate about. It's a great way to connect with others and practice expressing yourself in English.
Absolutely. Now, we've covered educational plans, career plans, and personal goals. Is there another scenario you think we should address?
Well, we've talked about specific types of plans, but maybe we should discuss how to handle situations when your plans are uncertain or when you're still figuring things out. That's a reality for many people, especially students who are still exploring their options.
That's such a great point, James. So often we focus on how to talk about definite plans, but in reality, many people are still discovering their path. Being able to express uncertainty or exploration in English is just as important as discussing concrete plans.
Definitely. And I think this is an area where many students feel uncomfortable, as they might think they need to have everything figured out. But it's completely normal to be uncertain, and being able to express that honestly in English is a valuable skill.
Absolutely. So what are some useful phrases for expressing uncertainty or that you're still exploring your options?
Well, you could use phrases like, "I'm still figuring out," or "I'm exploring several options right now," or "I haven't decided yet, but I'm considering." These expressions show that you're in a process of discovery rather than having a fixed plan.
Those are perfect examples. And you could also say things like, "I'm keeping my options open for now," or "I'm taking some time to decide what's next for me," or "I'm in the process of exploring different paths." These phrases convey a sense of thoughtful exploration rather than indecisiveness.
Right. And it can also be helpful to explain what factors you're considering as you explore your options. For example, "I'm weighing the pros and cons of," or "I'm trying to understand what really matters to me in," or "I'm gathering information about different paths before making a decision."
That's such a valuable point, James. Explaining your thought process shows that you're being thoughtful and deliberate without having a concrete plan yet. It demonstrates self-awareness and consideration, which are positive qualities in any context.
Definitely. And I think it's also important to remember that it's okay to change your plans. Being able to say things like, "I used to think I wanted to, but now I'm leaning towards," or "My plans have evolved as I've learned more about," shows growth and adaptability.
That's so true, James. Plans change as we grow and learn, and being able to communicate that evolution in English is an important skill. Now, would you like to do one more sample dialogue, this time focusing on expressing uncertainty or exploration?
Sure, I can play the role of someone who's still figuring out their next steps.
Perfect. Let's do that. So, James, when you're approaching graduation soon, right? What are your plans for after you finish your degree?
That's the big question, isn't it? To be honest, I'm still figuring out my next steps. I'm exploring several options at the moment, including continuing my education, entering the job market, or even taking some time off to travel and gain life experience.
That sounds like a thoughtful approach. What factors are you considering as you explore these different paths?
Well, I'm trying to understand what really matters to me in this next phase of my life. On one hand, I'm drawn to the idea of continuing my studies right away while I'm still in an academic mindset. On the other hand, I'm curious about gaining practical work experience and seeing how my academic knowledge applies in real-world settings.
Those are both valid considerations. How are you going about exploring these options?
I'm talking to people who have taken different paths, some who went straight to graduate school, others who entered the workforce, and a few who took gap years. I'm also researching different programs and job opportunities to get a better sense of what's out there. I'm giving myself until the end of the semester to gather information before making any decisions.
That sounds like a really thoughtful process. Do you have any sense of which direction you might be leaning toward?
I'm keeping my options open for now, but I think I'm slightly more drawn to gaining some work experience first. I feel like having a clearer sense of how my academic knowledge applies in professional settings would help me make a more informed decision if I do decide to pursue further education later on.
That makes a lot of sense. It sounds like you're approaching this decision with both thoughtfulness and openness. Whatever you decide, I'm sure it will be the right path for you.
Thank you, Amelia. I appreciate that. I'm doing my best to make them happen, one step at a time.
That was a wonderful example, James. You demonstrated how to express uncertainty and exploration in a positive, thoughtful way. You used phrases like, "I'm still figuring out," or "I'm exploring several options," and "I'm trying to understand what really matters to me," to convey your process of discovery.
Thanks. I tried to show that being uncertain doesn't mean being directionless. I'm actively exploring options and considering different factors, which I think is a healthy approach to making important life decisions.
Definitely. And I think this dialogue really illustrates how to discuss uncertainty in a way that shows thoughtfulness and self-awareness rather than indecisiveness. The key is to frame your uncertainty as a process of exploration and discovery.
Exactly. And I think this is an important message for our listeners. It's okay not to have everything figured out, and being able to express that honestly in English is a valuable skill.
Absolutely. Now, we've covered various scenarios for discussing future plans in English, from concrete educational and career goals to personal dreams, and even how to express uncertainty. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you think our listeners should know about this topic?
Well, I think it might be helpful to mention some common mistakes or pitfalls to avoid when talking about future plans in English. Sometimes knowing what not to do is just as important as knowing what to do.
That's a great idea, James. What are some common mistakes you've noticed when students talk about their future plans in English?
One common mistake is using the wrong tense or structure. For example, using present simple for future plans when it would be more natural to use going to or present continuous, like saying, "I visit my grandmother tomorrow," instead of "I'm visiting my grandmother tomorrow," or "I'm going to visit my grandmother tomorrow."
That's definitely a common issue. Another mistake I've noticed is being too vague when more specific information would be appropriate. For instance, in a job interview, saying, "I want to work in business" is much less impressive than saying, "I'm interested in pursuing a career in digital marketing, specifically focusing on content strategy for tech startups."
Oh, that's such a good point. Specificity shows that you've given real thought to your plans. Another common mistake is using overly formal or complex language when simpler expressions would sound more natural. For example, saying, "I shall endeavor to pursue a career in the field of," when "I'm planning to work in" would be more appropriate in most contexts.
Definitely. And I think another issue is failing to connect your plans to your motivations or interests. When you just state what you plan to do without explaining why, it can come across as uninspired or insincere.
That's so true. Adding that personal touch and explaining the why behind your plans makes them more compelling and authentic. Another mistake I've noticed is being too rigid or absolute about future plans. Life is unpredictable, and showing some flexibility in your plans often demonstrates maturity and adaptability.
Absolutely. And I think one more common issue is focusing too much on perfect grammar and not enough on clear communication. While grammar is important, what matters most is that your listener understands your plans and intentions.
That's such an important reminder, Amelia. Communication over perfection should always be the goal. Now, before we wrap up, do you have any final tips or advice for our listeners on how to improve their ability to talk about their future plans in English?
Great question. I think one of the best ways to improve is to practice regularly. You could try journaling about your future plans, having conversations with language partners, or even just talking to yourself about what you want to do in the future.
That's excellent advice, and I think it's also helpful to listen to how native speakers talk about their future plans. You could watch interviews, listen to podcasts, or pay attention to conversations in movies or TV shows. This can help you pick up natural expressions and structures.
Definitely. And I'd also recommend preparing for specific situations where you might need to discuss your future plans, like job interviews or university applications. Thinking about potential questions and practicing your responses can boost your confidence.
That's such a practical tip. And I think it's also important to remember that it's okay to make mistakes. Every mistake is an opportunity to learn and improve. The more you practice talking about your future plans in English, the more natural and confident you become.
Absolutely. Well, James, this has been such an informative and helpful discussion about talking about your future plans in English. We've covered so much ground, from basic grammar structures to specific scenarios for different types of plans, and even how to express uncertainty.
Definitely. I hope our listeners feel more confident now about discussing their future plans in English, whether they're talking about educational goals, career aspirations, personal dreams, or still figuring things out.
Me too. Remember, everyone, the key is to be clear, specific, and authentic when discussing your future plans in English. And don't forget to explain the why behind your plans. That's what makes them compelling and meaningful.
And most importantly, practice, practice, practice. The more you talk about your future plans in English, the more natural and confident you'll become.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining me, James. This has been a really valuable discussion.
It's been my pleasure, Amelia. I always enjoy our conversations, and I hope our listeners have found this episode helpful.
I'm sure they have. And to all our listeners out there, thank you for tuning in to Learning English Studio. We hope you'll join us again next time for more tips and strategies to improve your English skills.
Until then, keep practicing, stay curious, and don't be afraid to dream big in English.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.